mentally responsive date atmosphere.
The three approaches of fiscal consolidation: cut expenditure, improve on revenue mobilization effort. Those are the two-pronged things you have to do. However, it must be done carefully. I agree with fiscal consolidation, but we must be careful that it doesn't hurt growth. It doesn't hurt growth because we need to get on a growth path to be able to raise enough revenue to pay back our debt. So it's a trade-off. You must be careful. Don't overdo it.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought matters of debt acquisition, structure, usage, and sustainability to the forefront of economic concerns. According to the EPRC, the excessive increase in debt is a significant concern as a debt repayment is taking up a considerable portion of the government's budget, leaving limited resources for critical sectors. In the current fiscal year, debt servicing accounts for 35% of total government spending, while only 18% is allocated to human capital development. Legislators Jonathan Igwang and Cyrus Agon also echoed concerns about the rising debt burden.
Indeed, I want to agree with my colleague. We have some loans that we signed as early as 2017, as early as 2018, as early as 2019. Such projects have never been implemented up to now, but we have to pay that loan because we have already signed the money. Now we are being led down by who? It is the technocrats. Sometimes we have done our job as parliament, but when you go for oversight role, this is what you find, what is happening on the ground. But we can be able to cut our debt. We can be able. The problem is we are very indisciplined in that we keep borrowing day in, day out.
We are now in energy transition, where we are talking about leaving these fossil fuels, and now we go for electrical cars. How far are we moving? The money that we have invested in this Kira EV, billions of money, how much have we seen out? So I am concerned about the ROI, return on investment. When we borrow, can we first assess whatever loan we got, how much did it give us back in terms of feedback? Or it is just a failed investment. Most times we just borrow.
As a response, the Ministry of Finance, represented by Permanent Secretary Ramadhan Govi, who is the board chairman of the Economic Policy Research Center, stated that the government is adopting a new strategy to reduce unnecessary expenditures and enhance fiscal discipline.
We are scaling down borrowing, particularly domestic borrowing. And this, we are doing it so that we can be able to manage our interest, our financing cost, I should put it that way, our financing cost of debt.
Uganda's current debt stands at 80.7 trillion Ugandan shillings. However, analysts emphasize the importance of clearing all maturing debts in a timely manner to prevent debt multiplication.
Well, the size of debt which you borrow depends on your economy. Yeah? You don't borrow 200% because Japan borrowed 200%. Japan has its fundamentals. Yeah? It has ways of keeping debt stable. Yeah? The outflow, there's enough money, there's enough inflow which is equal to the outflow. So if a debt matures, it's paid. The stock doesn't matter. But are we able to do that?
Even though the government claims that the debt is manageable, economists are sounding an alarm on debt sustainability. Currently, Uganda's debt stock stands at approximately 49% of the gross domestic product.
Parliament this week faulted the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Geraldine Sali, for flouting procurement guidelines which caused irregularities in financial management at the ministry. The PS was appearing before the Trade and Tourism Committee of Parliament. Let's have a look.
The head of legal department at the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives notified members of Parliament that she was not involved in the procurement process which led to awarding of contract to renovate the ministry premises at Farmers House.
But regarding this matter, I will tell the committee without fear or favor that I have not been involved in this at any point.
This adds information to the queries which the Parliamentary Committee on Trade and Tourism bases for the steps the ministry undertook to bypass procurement regulations in disguise of restricted bidding.
This is not a defense to the accounting officer on her work done. This is a defense of the ministry. That is what we are tasked to do as legal officers. My learned colleague has absconded from making a defense to the ministry. You first make a defense to the ministry on its rules, and then you look into the conduct of specific procurements and all that.
The controversy over Tom Opio, the office attendant who later signed the procurement documents, prolonged the committee session, which sought for the legal procedures.
I was struck off the system, and I tried to log in the system. I was no longer accessing, and she can confirm it.
So who did the procurement for the vehicles?
Achwera Tom and Opio Tom.
Because the Tom could be on the system when the PS is not aware. Did he get this authorization from the PS? So that we know that whatever he's doing is with the full authorization and approval of the PS.
When you read Section 45 of the Public Finance Management Act, I believe that the accounting officer, in exercise of her duties and her decision-making, considers that she's doing so for the best interest of the budget control under Section 45(2).
Backed by the PS, Geraldine Sally, the ministry officials say that the time crisis and limited staff triggered the move for the restricted bidding, which cost was above the legal requirement of 500 million.
I had also limited staff there because I only had Mr. Lapiem and Mr. Chwera and then also the office attendant. But the office attendant who was there was actually a graduate of Makerere University, procurement and supplies, and also has a diploma, so his CV is here. So this is a man who actually had potential, only that he did not find a job in his profession.
If someone's job description is very clear, much as someone must be having a PhD, but the title reads that this is an office attendant. Chair, is the PS in order?
If the accounting officer in her wisdom thinks that in determining risk management, a certain officer can execute a budget better than a certain officer because maybe of sickness, it is within her powers under Section 45(2) to write to the Accountant General to designate an officer to perform those roles.
The Trade and Tourism Committee of Parliament, chaired by Mwine Mpaka, is in its final stages of investigating the misuse of the supplementary budget for purchase of cars and renting of offices by the Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. Daniel Mugoya, Gloria Gutabinji, UBC News.
Training of financial industry workers has commenced to prepare them on how to implement environmental, social and governance aspects, ESG, in their operations. It's part of the Uganda shillings 120 billion ABI Green Finance Fund initiative.
This training aimed to ensure that commercial banks, microfinance institutions and other lenders use their financial services to contribute to the protection and promotion of the environment and the well-being of the communities around them.
As you're well aware, everything we do within the financial services space and the agribusiness space requires financing. So last year we launched the 120 billion Green Finance Fund, which is mainly support financial institutions to support the agribusinesses, but we're also building capacities.
It is increasingly becoming an important determinant of investment priorities for international investments as part of the fight against climate change, human rights violation and corruption. Environmental, social and governance (ESG) is a framework used to assess an organization's business practices and performance on various sustainable and ethical issues.
on day-to-day basis they interact with the clients. So we do believe that if we train the staff of financial institutions well, we shall have reached the agribusiness players in how to adapt, to mitigate and to conserve the environment.
Jane Ike, a trainer with the Uganda Institute of Banking and Financial Services, says Uganda has come a little late because in some other countries, the financial industry has gone a little further in integrating ESG in their operations.
When we're analyzing these businesses have their figures, but behind that, what is making them sustainable? Are they looking at the end of the pyramid that is going to lift people out of poverty? But most importantly, the environment around us. How is it impacting on the businesses that they do work with?
The banking sector, together with ABI, are putting together a draft paper that should become a legal framework to compel lenders on implementation of ESG, which is projected to be ready by the end of next month. Wadulo Mark Arnold for UBC News in Wakiso.
And on to our next story, local sugar manufacturing companies have lauded government for imposing a 25% duty on imported industrial refined sugar. According to Kinyara Sugar, the largest local manufacturer, Uganda has the capacity to satisfy the annual demand of about 100,000 metric tons. With a correct policy framework and emphasis on import substitution, local investors and sugar sector players are optimistic of a bigger market, better earnings and significant sector growth.
We've been in the past exporting a lot of this. That's why our certification span from Belgium to South Africa, to UK, to Uganda, to India. We are certified in different areas. So we've been exporting in the past. But now that the government of Uganda has put up an enabling environment for us, not totally to stop the importation of white sugar, but to protect or put up an environment that allows for young industries that are manufacturing industrial sugar like Kinyara to grow, by putting a 25% duty, we will access the local market and we are able all the time to satisfy the local market, and once we access it, most of the industrial sugar will be consumed.
Industrially refined white sugar is used as a raw material in the pharmaceutical industries, confectionaries, beverage manufacturing companies, among others. According to Kinyara Sugar, their product meets international standards.
Our raw material comes from the light brown and brown sugar, which is processed in the processing plant that we saw first. Now, once we receive this brown or light brown sugar, we melt it. That's the first phase. And after melting, it undergoes several processes, including clarification, where we clarify the juice to remove the colors. And then it goes through a malt bed filters. And after the malt bed filters, it goes through ion exchange. The whole purpose is to reduce the color from about 900 Ikumsa units to about 100 Ikumsa units of mascute. And after curing, we get about 25 to 40 color units.
Unlike brown sugar that is commonly used in households, white sugar is more expensive because of its lengthy and costly production process. Kinyara Sugar, located in Masinde district, sells it at $915 per metric ton.
We do produce every day 250 metric tons of white sugar, which is milled from our light brown and brown sugar. In stock, as you can see here, we have 5,500 metric tons. In Kampala, we have 100 metric tons in stock. But in addition, as I said, we have the 250 plus that is produced every day. So that means that Kinyara Sugar Limited can produce for the local market in Uganda if we are protected.
The 25% duty slapped on imported industrial sugar not only protects local producers, but also takes away the problem of diversion of imported refined sugar into the retail market for light brown sugar. Sigoa for UBC Business. Government has released Uganda shillings 4.8 trillion for Q1 expenditure for the financial year 2023-2024. According to Ramadan Govi, the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, the timely release is geared at fostering government operations.
This quarter is going to run from July to September, and we have allocated or released 4.833 trillion shillings, representing 16% of the discretionary budget, as follows: wage, 1.824 trillion shillings; non-wage, 2.698 trillion shillings; Government of Uganda Development, 198.35 billion, and arrears, 111.688 billion. So in total, we released the cash of 4 trillion 832 billion and 918 million shillings. The breakdown of this money is as follows. As I've told you, the wage has been fully released as budgeted for the quarter, 1 trillion 824 billion shillings, and that constitutes 25% of the wage budget. This includes 50% release for missions abroad, so that we can hedge them against loss of poundage. Since they are paying their wages in a foreign currency, we wanted to protect them against loss of value of the currency. So we released 50% of their money.
The Private Sector Foundation Uganda has launched a multi-million-dollar youth engagement campaign. PSFU's initiative targets over 300,000 youth and is part of the Young Africa Works lead farm structure that was launched in 2019.
First role we have is to create jobs. That's our primary role. We're here to create employment for the youth and for all Ugandans.
The Youth Engagement Program by the Private Sector Foundation Uganda will provide young people with a platform to express themselves, advocate for their interests, and actively influence policies and decision-making.
Our Youth Engagement Program is aimed at bringing young people to participate in our programs, be decision makers in our programs, but not only as beneficiaries. So it means that any program that we will be doing as PSFU will have an input of the young people, and the young people will have a chance to decide whether it works for them or not.
US $89 million will be utilized on a long term to socially and economically empower the Ugandan youth. Youth Engagement Campaign is part of PSFU's broader Young Africa Works Enhancing Lead Farm Structure for Youth Employment in Uganda project implemented with the MasterCard Foundation.
The young people will be part of deciding what it should be, what we should be focusing on, how we should be doing it, how we should reach them. So we are planning, besides the number of youth that we are looking to find jobs for, that are 300,000 young people, we want to even reach much more beyond those that are benefiting from the projects that we have. If we can reach every youth in Uganda, that would be very good, and it will be our target over the long term.
Young entrepreneurs and youth from across the country who attended the launch event at the Uganda Museum grounds underscored the importance of multi-sectoral support and their views being factored in on matters that concern them.
I'm so grateful for them because they are doing, their programs are inclusive, because PWDs, you'll find them, we are used to be beggars. That is the slogan that most of people know about us, but then if me, as a person with a physical challenge, has a company, I can transport or I can transfer the knowledge from my company and share with the 12.4 disabled people in the country. So I do believe that this project of PSFU will be of a great impact to the youth.
Since its launch in 2019, the Lead Farm Structure project has so far mobilized 137,000 youth and managed to transit 96,270 youth into meaningful and dignified work. Dennis Sigoa for UBC News.
To the international scene, Russia has suspended participation in Black Sea grain deal. Russia, which is currently at war with Ukraine, has complained that obstacles persist for Russian exports of grain and fertilizer due to Western sanctions and presented a series of demands that it said had not been made.
The Black Sea grain deal hasn't had much impact on Russia or its farmers, meaning that this latest news is largely being met with a shrug. One of Moscow's key complaints is that the grain deal had been implemented so unfairly it made no difference to Russian exporters. The Kremlin claims the part of the deal relating to Ukrainian agricultural exports serves only commercial interests, and the part relating to facilitating Russian agricultural exports has seen zero progress.
For Russia, the extension of the deal plays a very small role, especially for the farmers who have not received anything. In my opinion, it will be even better for Russia's image if the deal is not extended. Because in that case, as Putin said, those poor countries in Africa that did not get anything under the grain deal, or no more than 3% from those agricultural products, will instead be supplied with grain from Russia as part of the food aid.
Russian officials have said that contrary to the noble goals of the deal to supply the poorest countries in need, the main beneficiary of the deal was the European Union, while Brussels claims 57% of the grain went to developing countries.
The volume of grain that the poorest countries received, and I repeat this, is a little over 3%. We will be ready to deliver to the poorest countries free of charge.
Moscow also complained about Ukraine's use of the grain deal's sea corridors to launch marine drones. The destruction of the Telyati-Odessa ammonia pipeline was seen as yet more proof that the West was not interested in the deal's extension.
For Russian producers, this deal does not play any role at all. It only harms them in terms of sales markets. It doesn't help Russian producers in any way. It was promised there would be relief for Russian grain exports, but there's no relief. We didn't expect it, but it was clear from the very beginning that none of this would work.
Russian agricultural producers are now expected to continue exporting as they have been exporting after February 24 last year.
Those involve problems with insurance and freight that have become unprecedentedly expensive, as well as the lack of access to SWIFT payment system, making transactions far more complicated.
Russian exporters say they are now used to those roadblocks, but continue to experience negative consequences.
Despite all these obstacles, the volume of exports is not affected. What is affected is the price of exported goods, because these risks are being included in the selling price. Therefore, our prices are much lower than, for instance, the French produce prices. On average, our discount is between $10 to $20 per ton. That's the money we're losing.
Russian experts also suggest that the talk of a global food crisis is more of a PR campaign. They insist there is no deficit, that the question is more about what the clients can afford to buy. And so they predict this latest decision means the impact to global prices will be limited.
So AI is, many people are afraid of AI, and for good reasons, and there are great names on both sides of this argument. The ones that say we can't use AI, or rather, maybe the word is to harness AI to our advantage. And I was giving an example. Recently, I needed to do something on my database that I had no clue how to do. I went to ChatGPT, which is one example of AI, and was able to generate the queries I wanted to run on my database and get what I wanted. So up to that level, AI is very good. Of course, there are those that argue that it will replace ultimately Because for once we have a tool that is able to create, and that is always a dangerous place to play in. So where we have AI being able to make decisions on behalf of human beings, that is the dangerous place to go to, and that's what needs to be regenerated, or that needs to be regulated well. But to the extent where AI can help us have capabilities that we didn't previously have, I think that's a good place to be.
As we sign out, we leave you with some words of wisdom. If you're planning, ensure you plan all the way to the end. By planning all the way, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances and definitely know when and where to stop. Thank you for being part of the Business Roundup, and we are glad that you've been with us all the way. Let's catch up same time, same place next week. From the team and I, good night.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Dear Airtel customer, we know that there are days when unexpected stays in hospital stand in the way of your family's welfare. That is why Hospital Center is here to give you up to 100,000 shillings every night you spend in hospital. Hospital Center also offers up to 4 million in funeral benefit. Dial *185*7*6# to purchase Hospital Center on Airtel Money for as little as 1,000, 3,000 or 5,000 shillings a month. Your cover for the first 1 month is free. Hospital Center is underwritten by Prudential and powered by Turaco. Prudential and Turaco are regulated by the Insurance Regulatory Authority of Uganda. Airtel Money is regulated by the Bank of Uganda.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.